True Crime Society podcast contains adult themes and violence and is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. And if you'd like to skip the intro or move to any specific part of the podcast, please refer to the timestamps listed in the episode description. Thank you. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the True Crime Society podcast with Stephanie and Olivia. It is October 26, 2025, and we are just a few days out from Halloween. This episode will be coming out the day before Halloween, so I hope that you guys are all excited and ready. This is going to be a Halloween episode. We did find another Halloween crime. We were looking for some because we've covered a lot over the years, but
now
we were able to find a few more.
Yeah.
This one's maybe the craziest one, which I'm surprised we both hadn't heard of it before.
I feel like it's been one that's gone under the radar. Like, I hadn't heard of it until I came across it while searching for our Halloween crime, but it's one I feel that probably could have been solved or more should have happened in the case, and it hasn't for whatever reason.
Yeah. So before we get into the case, we have to have our chat. And my topic that I've brought to the table today, sorry, chat haters, is since now I have a child, I decided that I was going to watch Casper and put on child television while I sat there, even though he's not watching it. But I figured I'd get used to it. And Casper was on. And as a kid, I freaking loved Casper. I had a Casper stuffed animal. Casper, and a lot of girls will agree with me, as crazy as it sounds, like Casper is every girl my age's first crush, basically, like for some reason.
Was it the Devon Sauer one? Is that the one that you watched? Yeah. I do remember that when I was growing up. Everyone loved him and loved that movie.
Yeah. So like Casper was all of our boyfriends. But so now I'm watching it through the eyes of an adult. And I'm like, this movie's actually super dark and depressing. Like, as a kid, you don't realize it. And I find that with a lot of kids' movies, kind of when you go back and watch them, that there's always another kind of story in it for the adults. But it's so sad. It's about, like, the mom died and the girl and her dad are living together and they're, like, trying to move on and cope with their grief. And the girl was talking about how she feels like she's forgetting her mom and blah, blah, blah. The dad is struggling a lot with it. And then Casper himself, he's talking about how he doesn't remember anything from his life at all. But then as the story goes on, he starts to remember and that he was out sledding with his dad. And his dad was like, come on, Casper, like we got to go inside. And he was like, no, let's sled more. And then he got sick from being outside in the cold for so long. And then he died. So it must have been like the 1800s or something. But his dad was so depressed that he built a machine to try to bring him back to life.
I haven't watched that movie for a while. I might have to check it out again because I don't recall any of that.
Me neither. I was just like, oh, Casper the Friendly Ghost, like this silly fun movie. And then I was like, oh, Casper is just this sad lost child who wants to make friends living with his 3 abusive uncle ghosts.
When you were talking about like movies that have like a dark thing, and I know that this is an obviously sad movie, but My Girl, you know, with Macaulay Culkin, how he dies after he gets stung by the bees, that is an absolutely horrible movie. Like, it's so traumatic, but it was like a kid's movie. I watched it 1,000 times growing up, but it was so traumatic.
Well, Mike and I were saying also with kids movies and like family TV shows back in the 90s, early 2000s, they loved a widow or widower. One parent was always dead.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They love like a dead parent story. Like, even I took my kids when they were little to see, I think it was called The Good Dinosaur. And I'm like, you know, this is going to be fine. It was like G-rated. It was so traumatic. I'm like, I just can't believe that this is a children's movie. It's way too much.
Yeah. Even The Fox and the Hound, I went back and watched it as an adult, and so depressing. She leaves the fox out in the rain and is driving away. And like, what's wrong with these Disney movies and kids movies?
Even like we could keep going. Bambi's another one. And
even I love Finding Nemo. It's always been like one of my favorite like Pixar cartoon Disney movies. It made me so happy for a long time. And then as a parent, I'm like, oh my God, he just loved Nemo so much and he would do anything to find him and he was just trying to protect him, but he had to let him live. I'm like, what is wrong with me?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so let us know in the comments like what movies have you thinking like that or TV shows, because I'd love to hear more of them and make a list.
I feel like The Land Before Time, I can't quite remember the
Yes, oh
plot,
my
but I
god.
feel like that involved
The
a
mom
dead
died.
parent or something. Yeah.
And he was there and the child is always like crying with their dead body after they pass away.
I know. Oh my gosh.
Like The Lion King, Land Before Time, I'm pretty sure that
Yeah,
happened.
the Lion King. No wonder everyone's so messed up.
Yeah, so let us know any other ones that you guys think of. What's going on with you? Anything exciting? What's your
No.
chat topic?
Well, we did have someone ask in Patreon the other week, and I thought,
yeah.
because we've got some new listeners, maybe some people haven't heard me talk about this before, and they said basically, is Halloween really a thing in Australia? And it is becoming increasingly more of a thing. Like when I was growing up, it wasn't a thing. Now, like some stores have a bit of Halloween stuff you can
Do you
buy.
have
Like
Spirit Halloween?
no, absolutely not. No.
Oh my god.
We have like is that's a Halloween store, I'm assuming. I'm pretty sure I've seen it on like Instagram
Yeah,
and stuff.
everyone
No.
jokes like as soon as any store goes out of business, it's turning into a Spirit Halloween.
Oh, no, we definitely don't have that. We have, where I live, we have a store, and I'm pretty sure there might be a few around the country, so maybe other people have similar stores, but it's called the Base Warehouse. But they do everything. So like at Christmas, they'll have Christmas stuff. They do have some Halloween stuff, like even Big W, which is like, I don't even know what you'd like it, like a Walmart kind of type store. They have a little bit of Halloween, like a few stands of Halloween, but that is an increase from nothing like a few years ago. So some people do it. Like when I was in Sydney yesterday and some houses were decorated, like I probably saw maybe 10 houses when I was walking in this massive walk across the city. So some people do it. It's not generally a big thing here. Some people hate it. They're like, it's got nothing to do with us. Why are we having it here? Like they say it's a very American holiday. So some people refuse to participate, but my kids have always been like, I always take them trick-or-treating. Like there's a few streets that are known to do it. So everyone takes their kids there. It's definitely not a big proper holiday as such, but it is becoming, I think, increasingly a little bit more popular.
That's fun. I mean, it's fun for the kids, so.
Yeah, the kids love it. So I'm like, it's harmless, and even they say basically like, I'm assuming it's probably the same there, but you only trick or treat at houses that are decorated because that it shows they want to participate,
and like the lights are on.
And even some people who don't want to participate will put up signs saying like, no trick or treaters, thanks, and all that type of stuff. So it's quite easy to determine who wants to, participate. But yeah.
Just a fun holiday. Like we all need some more fun in our lives.
Yeah, why not? It's a little bit of harmless fun. Kids enjoy it. Gets people out in the community. Why not?
Yeah, off their cell phones and their iPads, exactly. Off social media.
So just quickly I think we forgot last week, but this week we do have a listener of the week. Her name is Emily. I do give out my book recommendations because I do read a decent amount, or I try to read a fair amount anyway. One of the books I read recently, I think it was on Patreon that I mentioned it. It was called Matchmaking for Psychopaths. It's by an author called Tasha Coriel. She's also written another book called Love Letters to a Serial Killer, which I feel like is probably up the alley of a lot of people who listen to true crime. They're fun books, not the most amazing thing you'll ever read, but very entertaining, easy to read. So I had given that recommendation, and Emily said, I read both of the books based on Olivia's recommendation and loved them. I own a housekeeping business, so I listen to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts. I always love the recommendations. Thanks, Olivia, for all the great books. I really love Frida McFadden as well. So I talk a lot about her books. Again, great and easy, entertaining reads, often crime related or, crime based. So check them out if you are looking for something new to read.
Yeah, and if you want even more recommendations, check us out on Patreon because we do have a book club chat where everyone talks about their recommendations.
Yeah, I actually just hosted book club. How it works is like you host once every 18 months. It goes around, everyone has a turn. So we've got, about that many people in the book club. So every year or 18 months you have a turn. It was my turn on Friday. So my book was The Girls Who Grew Big. The Girls Who Grew Big by Layla Motley. Now, everyone loved that book. I reckon it got about a solid 8 rating. I'm still waiting to hear what our November book is, but I will let you know once we do hear that. Before we get into the episode, we're going to hear a word from today's sponsor, Skylight. Some days I feel like my brain is at full capacity. I know there's so much to do. There's errands to run, places everyone needs to be, birthdays. Often I'll be like, oh my gosh, it's so-and-so's birthday tomorrow. I've got nothing organized. If you are like me, you feel overloaded sometimes, you can let Skylight Calendar handle the rest. It can sync your family's entire schedule onto a sleek digital display so you can focus on more important things like remembering where you left your keys, your coffee. Sometimes, once I even put the keys on the top of the car, drove away, and then when I got to the place the keys were still there, thank God. So sometimes when it's chaotic, our Skylight Calendar is so handy.
Yeah, I actually had to take mine down for a little bit because I was moving stuff around and I felt so lost and sad without it.
I know. Even like my daughter loves moving it around. Like, it was in the pantry, now it's in the lounge room where we can all see it, which I actually prefer because I can see what's going on every single day. Makes my life so much easier.
It's a Wi-Fi connected digital display that showcases your family's schedule, clarity, color, and brilliance in either a 10 or 15-inch HD touchscreen. You'll be able to manage events, chores, and grocery lists while setting colors for each of your family members and eliminating excuses of not knowing what they needed to do. And with the free Skylight Companion app, you can add or update events, lists, and more on the go. Your happiness is Skylight's happiness, so if in 120 days you are not 100% thrilled with your purchase, you can return it for a full refund, no questions asked. Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to myskylight.com/TCS. Go to myskylight.com/TCS for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That's myskylight.com/TCS. All right, should we get into it?
Yeah.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the unsolved murder of Arpana Jinaga, who was from Seattle, and she was murdered following a Halloween party at her Washington State apartment complex in 2008. And we were saying both of us never really heard of this case before, and it's a pretty brutal, horrible murder. Not that like the others aren't, but I was just shocked that for the graphic horribleness of this one that I didn't recall ever hearing about it, because you'd think it'd be one that a lot of people would have been talking about at the time.
Yeah, there have been like I had never heard of it either till I came across it while looking for Halloween cases. There has been some previous coverage on this. The Unresolved podcast did an episode on this, and they've got a really, really comprehensive write-up. So we've used some of so I've linked it in the blog as well if you want to check it out. They did a really deep dive into this case, and it is one that I feel like is covered over the years. Generally around Halloween time, it kind of comes up in the media a bit more, just as even an anniversary type situation, because even now after all these years it's still unsolved.
Arpana was born on November 3rd, 1984 in Hyderabad, India. Her parents are BC and Nirmala Jinaga. BC worked as a professor of computer engineering, and Nirmala was a stay-at-home mother. Arpana's family has said that she loved art, writing, and gymnastics as a child. As she grew up, she became very interested in technology, and as a teen, she participated in an IEEE hardware design contest, which drew attention from universities and potential employers. In June 2005, she was 20 years old. She was featured in the New Indian Express in an article titled Young Inventors. After she graduated from high school, she attended university in India, and she decided to move to the US after that for her post-grad studies. She attended Rutgers University in New Jersey and got her master's degree in electrical and computer engineering in December 2007. So she was clearly a very smart, dedicated, hard worker.
Seems like she was a bit of a rising star. Like she was quite well known in her field, or up and coming in her field. Had a very bright future ahead of her.
Yeah. After she graduated, instead of returning to India, she took a job with tech company EMC, which is now known as Dell EMC, and she moved to Redmond, Washington. She worked there from March 2008. Her coworkers said that she was hardworking and was considered a rising star. Arpana was promoted in October 2008, which is just 7 months after she began with the company. At the time, she was living at the Valley View apartment complex in Redmond.
So I had a look at the property online on real estate websites. It looks like it's like a 3 or 4 story kind of apartment complex. It's not like a super high rise. It's very like long. So long and, not super high. Looks like a nice place. The apartments look fine. Looks like a little bit older, but it looks like it was a nice enough community. Just to give you an idea of the kind of setting where this took place. It wasn't like a high-rise apartment
Luxury.
complex. Yeah, it was just more of a
average,
a smaller complex. Yeah.
She didn't know anyone in the area, but quickly made friends. She also purchased a motorcycle and volunteered at the Redmond Fire Department and animal shelter. How'd she have the time?
I know, she was so
She was
busy.
busy. She participated in Taekwondo classes and integrated herself into her new community. On October 31st, 2008, which was a Friday, she went to work as she would have any other day, and she told her coworkers that there was a party being held at her apartment complex that night. After work, she went and purchased some decorations for her apartment, and she went home to put them up and decorate. That night, Arpana dressed up as Little Red Riding Hood, and she and at least 3 other neighbors in the complex opened their apartments up for the party. So I guess just kind of people going in and out is what it seems like.
Yeah, it looks like it's because, as I mentioned, it's kind of long and short, the apartment. So it looks like along each, like there's a balcony. So like like it's almost like what you think of like one of those kind of motel, hotel type things where you'd stay.
Yeah,
So you can access everyone's apartment. You don't need like codes or anything. And you literally just walk along the balcony or the walkway and you can go into one apartment after the other.
right. More than 24 people attended throughout the course of the night, and some reports indicate that most of the guests left Arpana's apartment by 9 p.m. and they moved on to the next apartment in the complex. Witnesses have said that Arpana got into a verbal fight with a man that night. This was said to be race related after the man made inappropriate comments. Arpana was said to have quickly moved on after the fight, and she seemed to enjoy the rest of the night. The complex party finally ended around 3 a.m., and Arpana was seen heading back to her apartment on the 3rd floor. According to the Unsolved podcast, neighbors would report hearing what sounded like sounds of consensual sex coming from Arpana's apartment. They said they heard muffled moaning around 3 a.m. So this is a quote from the Unresolved podcast write-up. They've said, one of Arpana's neighbors, Kyle R., would later remark that around 8 a.m., he was awoken by a horrible growling sound, which persisted for about 20 seconds and was punctuated with a solid thud sound. He then heard the sound of running water in Arpana's apartment, which lasted for about an hour. After October 31st, Arpana did not answer any calls from her family, which was very out of character for her. Monday rolled around and Arpana did not show up for work, which I'm also assuming was out of character for her.
Yeah, it sounds
One
like
of
she
her
was quite
coworkers,
conscientious and like wouldn't be a no-show. So they were all
yeah,
worried quite quickly about it.
yeah. One of her coworkers tried to call her but was unable to get through. Arpana's family in India called a family friend named Jay and asked him to go and check on her as they were not able to get in touch. Jay got to the complex around 9 a.m. on Monday. Jay ran into a neighbor of Arpana's, and we'll call this person CJ.
Yeah, this person's name is listed online. We'll get into more about this person, but we aren't going to say their full name because they haven't been charged with anything in relation to this case, but that's why we're not naming him specifically.
Yeah. And sorry if you hear crying baby right now. So to give some background on CJ, he lived next door to Arpana and said he had a close relationship with her. They previously hung out often, but had drifted in the months prior to the incident due to Arpana's busy schedule. So together, Jay and CJ decided to obtain access to Arpana's apartment to check on her. When they knocked on the door, it swung open. They could tell that the door had at some point been forced open and the jamb was broken. So this information about the scene is from Reddit. It says the two discovered her locked door had been kicked in. They found her nude body on her bedroom floor, face down on the carpet and partially covered with cloth. Arpana had been gagged with her underpants and duct tape, brutally beaten around the head. There was evidence of rape. She's suspected to have died from strangulation from a bootlace. Her hands were covered in blue toilet bowl cleaner. Her body and other items were covered in motor oil. Her finger and fingernails were cleaned. There was burn marks on her body, and apartment suggests somebody tried to burn her. Arpana's bed had been stripped, a fleece blanket was partially burned, and her comforter was found soaked in the bathroom bathtub. In the apartment, there was a strong smell of bleach, and also bleach stains were found. In the apartment complex's trash bin was a bag containing Arpana's Halloween costume, a bloodied robe, discarded bottle of motor oil, and the bootlace. Very random, the toilet bowl cleaner and the motor oil, but I guess they're just trying
to get rid of any DNA evidence that they possibly could. Like you would think that the bleach and the kind of harsh chemicals may get rid of whatever was still left behind.
Yeah, I guess the toilet bowl cleaner was probably in the apartment, and it's like, who would have motor oil just on hand? Well, she had a motorcycle, so she could have actually had it. When police arrived, they found a bottle of Castrol motorcycle oil in the complex's dumpster. It was thought that the offender had sprayed the oil all over the scene and Arpana's body. Arpana's motorcycle was missing from the scene also. Other missing items included one of her ID cards, her BlackBerry, and her digital camera. Arpana's autopsy was conducted by the King County Medical Examiner, and the results were released on November 6, 2008. It was determined that Arpana had been strangled and asphyxiated to death around 2 days before her body had been found. This means that she likely died on the morning of November 1st, 2008, after she returned from the Halloween party. It was estimated that she had died between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. on November 1st. She suffered other injuries, including multiple blunt force blows to the head, and several of her teeth were broken. She had been gagged with her own underwear, and her killer used duct tape to keep the gag in place, and she'd also been raped. Lieutenant Brian Coates would later tell reporters about the crime scene, saying it was a scene where the suspect or suspects spent a considerable amount of time covering the evidence of the crime. It was a brutal scene. It was just gruesome. I hope I never have to investigate a case like this again. Police investigated and came across a person of interest named Emmanuel Fair. Emmanuel was not a permanent resident of the complex, but had been staying with a resident and had attended the party. Emmanuel had been previously arrested almost a dozen times and had several sentences for drug and firearms crimes, as well as sexually motivated offenses. Emmanuel kept questionable companions, including a man named Omar Norman. Omar is a convicted murderer. He is serving a 52-year sentence for killing a man in October 2005. Years before Arpana was murdered, Emmanuel had been arrested and charged with raping a minor. He was convicted and sentenced to 4 years in prison in 2004. 4 years. Okay. He was released by the end of 2006 and was labeled as a level 1 sex offender, meaning that he was least likely to reoffend.
So he served 2 years out of a 4-year sentence for sexually assaulting
Raping a
minor, and then was still labeled as level 1, unlikely to do it again. It's crazy.
After his release, he had no fixed address, and this is how he came to be staying at Arpana's apartment complex with a friend. The friend was named Leslie, and Leslie initially lied to police and said that she was home alone at the time of the party. But police established that Emmanuel was there after reviewing photographs from the night. Authorities were also able to establish that Emmanuel had spent time with a neighbor named CJ that we mentioned before. On November 21st, 2008, Emmanuel admitted that he'd been inside Arpana's apartment during the Halloween party. He said they had gotten along well and their interaction had been brief. Police kept investigating the case, and in October 2010, they announced that they were charging Emmanuel with the murder of Arpana. They declared that they found Emmanuel's DNA at the crime scene and on several pieces of evidence that they believed the killer had used. This included the tape used to gag Arpana, DNA on her body, and a bloody robe that had been found at the scene. Authorities also said that there had been several inconsistencies in Emmanuel's version of events. This is also from the Unresolved podcast. Says, even though he claimed to have gone home to his friend's apartment around 1 a.m. to sleep, cell phone records indicate that he made dozens of phone calls to numerous women between 2 and 5 a.m., including several calls to Leslie, the woman whose apartment he had been sleeping at. Prosecutors implied that Emmanuel had been lying about where he was during these vital hours, which were made unexplained nearly 2 years later. Speaking to the press, King County Senior Deputy Prosecutor Jeff Baird claimed the defendant opened the locked door to Arpana's apartment, attacked her, stripped off her clothing, gagged her, assaulted her, and finally strangled her to death.
So Emmanuel's defense team started to prepare their case. They claimed that he'd been treated very differently to other persons of interest in the case due to his race. Emmanuel is a black man. They alleged that investigators had been particularly hostile towards Emmanuel, maybe because of this reason, and more so than they had been to the other suspects, including CJ and other people that they had questioned. The defense also raised the issue of a discrepancy within forensic evidence in the case. True allele was used extensively by investigators in the case. Again, the Unresolved podcast go into a lot of detail about this aspect of the case, and this is some information from the podcast. It says True Allele is a genotyping software developed by a company named Cybergenetics, which is used by law enforcement all over the country. It's a software that uses thousands of algorithms to read DNA and translate it essentially into evidence that investigators and prosecutors can use. that says using almost 200,000 lines of code, TrueAllele can analyze evidence with more than half a dozen contributors and determine who the most likely culprit is based on how many genetic markers are left on the evidence and where. Apparently, according to the Seattle Weekly, the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab found that Emmanuel was 1,000 times more likely to have committed the crime than an unrelated African American, but TrueAllele found him to be 56.8 million times more likely. So this is a very large, discrepancy essentially. It says this analysis was seen as invaluable to the prosecution, who saw this as ironclad proof of Emmanuel's guilt. Emmanuel's defense attorneys, according to the Unresolved podcast, on the other hand, didn't see it that way. They argued that the analysis performed by TrueAllele until they were able to at least look through the source code of the software to determine how the program had come to the determination. Until such a time, they had to take the program at its word. So basically, they are just kind of going along with what TrueAllele are saying because they hadn't had a chance to review the methodology used by the system. This led to a long and drawn-out dispute through the court system, as Cybergenetics CEO Dr. Mark Perlin refused to give out the source code of his program, believing that doing so would bring his company's trade secrets into the company would bring risk to his company's trade secrets. Even though Emmanuel and other defendants all over the country began to demand access to the software, Dr. Perlin was willing to take the issue to the court to preserve the company's kind of secrets and methodology. So that was a big bone of contention in this case. Was, I guess, the programming correct? Should it be able to be used based on there being no transparency around what was happening?
How they figure it out.
Yeah. So Emmanuel's trial would finally begin in February 2017, which was more than 8 years after Arpana had been murdered. Prosecutors announced that they were seeking more than the recommended sentence, which meant more than 45 years in prison for him if he was convicted. The prosecution alleged that Emmanuel met Arpana at the Halloween party and that he'd become infatuated with her. They claimed that Emmanuel said he had gone back to his friend Leslie's apartment at 1 a.m. on the night of the party. As we mentioned earlier, between 2 and 5 a.m., he made almost 24 phone calls to 3 different women. One of the women he apparently called was Leslie, which why is he calling Leslie if he's in her apartment? That kind of indicates that maybe he wasn't where he was saying he was. One of the women that he called testified and said that Emmanuel had called her 3 times at around 4:45 a.m., but that the calls had gone straight to voicemail. The woman listened to the messages and said she could hear kind of movement and rustling, but there was no voice or, nothing verbal was said in the messages.
Like a pocket dial maybe?
Yeah, sounds like it. Like she could obviously hear him rustling and doing something, but there was nothing was said. Emmanuel claimed to have no recollection of these calls and said that he had likely called the numbers accidentally, which I don't know how you can call 24 times to 3 different people accidentally, maybe a few times, but that seems like a lot. Prosecutors also claimed that Emmanuel's DNA was found in places that only the murderer would have had access to, as we mentioned, the gag tape and the bloody bathrobe that was found. It was also alleged that Emmanuel may have acted with the other neighbour, CJ. This is a quote from the documents. It says, the state's position is that CJ may have participated in the crime with Emmanuel, and the evidence implicating CJ does not exculpate Emmanuel. Rather than an other suspect, CJ can also be categorised as an uncharged accomplice. There's a really good write-up on this case on the Unsolved Mysteries subreddit, and this is a summary from that, which we've linked on the blog. It says there was DNA from 2 to 3 males found at the crime scene. Emmanuel's DNA was found on Arpana's neck, a piece of duct tape that was used to gag her, a piece of toilet paper or paper towel found at the crime scene, and was mixed with Arpana's blood on her bathrobe. The neighbour CJ showed up to the party in Arpana's unit late. He appeared drunk and bought liquor. DNA was found on a discarded bottle of motor oil, which was found in the same bag as the robe. It was reported in the Seattle Times that a third male's DNA was found on the bootlace, but that isn't reported in court documents. So that is kind of up for a discussion, I guess, if that is a real part of the case. But according to the Seattle Times, that is what happened. Emmanuel's defense argued if they were counting the DNA that had been found at the scene as such a large part of the evidence in the case, then CJ should also have been definitely considered a suspect. This is due to him living next door to Arpana, having had a close relationship with her. Obviously, he'd been in her apartment. His DNA was also, found. So that was part of their argument. Some of the DNA that was found at the scene was found to be from people who had not even attended the Halloween party. The scene was very hard to investigate as more than a dozen people had been inside Arpana's apartment just on the Halloween night alone. So that's not accounting for anyone else who had been in the apartment at other times. There had been at least 12 people coming and going. There was probably, I'm assuming, liquor, things were happening, things were spilled. It would have been a very hard scene to properly forensically investigate. It was also revealed that Emmanuel had apparently been involved in a minor accident at one point around the time of the party, and that resulted in him getting a bloodied lip inside Arpana's apartment. And the defense said that he cleaned up his injury in Arpana's bathroom, and that may explain why his DNA was found there at the scene. I guess seems
I was going to
plausible
say,
enough.
it's like, it's hard to prove because they were in her apartment. Like, it's known that they were in her apartment, so they weren't only in there to kill her.
Yeah, exactly. They were there for the party. Everyone, like over a dozen people, everyone knew they were in there. So it was...
So there's a bunch of different DNA in there.
The defense also spoke about gaps in the investigation. They pointed out that it had taken law enforcement more than 2 years to identify Emmanuel as a suspect. Apparently, investigators prior to that had been so stuck on the case that they even hired a psychic, which kind of tells me that they really had no idea. If they had to resort to a psychic, they really apparently had no idea prior to this.
No offense to any psychics, but...
The defense also claimed that evidence that was found in the dumpster, which implicated Emmanuel, was found 2 days after Arpana's body was discovered. This meant that the dumpster was obviously open. People had access to it, so it could have been dumped at other times, tampered with. Basically, it wasn't a secure crime scene at the time. There was opportunity for other people to have tampered with the evidence. The trial ran for around 2 months. It ended with a hung jury. There were 12 jurors in the case, and they had originally leaned 9-3 in favour of Emmanuel being acquitted. They were sent back to keep deliberating. They ultimately returned again with a split decision, 6-6. 6 were in favour of guilty, 6 were in favour of not guilty, and 5 of them believed that CJ, the other neighbour, may have also been involved. The jury was unable to come to a consensus, and this meant that a mistrial was declared. The prosecution quickly announced that they intended to retry Emmanuel, and they set a court date for just a few months later, which was September 2017. But just a few days before the retrial was due to begin, proceedings were placed on hold by the Court of Appeal. So this obviously slowed things down in the case. They dragged on for, years, essentially. Through 2017 and 2018, the state started to build their case again. They were alleging that Emmanuel had acted with an accomplice, but that there was a second person, but that second person was not being charged with anything at the time. So it's so crazy to me that they tried to use this as their defense, that someone else was involved, but that person is going to remain uncharged for now. We'll just focus on Emmanuel. Emmanuel's attorneys, rightfully so, argued that this was unjust. Attempting to convict him and someone who was uncharged, they said, was unconstitutional. They could try each of the men separately or together, but they couldn't try one man for the potential crimes of both, which I absolutely agree is a valid argument. Emmanuel's attorneys continued to argue that though his DNA had been found at the scene, so had DNA and evidence belonging to other people, including CJ. CJ, as we mentioned, has never been charged with anything in relation to this case, but he was interviewed multiple times. Investigators even started to get the probable cause paperwork ready to apply for his arrest, but that never happened. CJ admitted to authorities that he had stopped taking his psychiatric medication in October 2008, which seems to me like that should be a pretty important part of the case and something that should be looked into. But despite this, they apparently never asked for any other information about what medication he had been taking, what his mental illness diagnosis was. They never asked for any clarification on any of that.
Perf.
Yeah. It was revealed that CJ, as we mentioned, showed up late and drunk to the party. He told investigators about Arpana. She looked really good. I hadn't seen her for months. I never thought about her like that prior to the night of the Halloween party. So, it sounds like she was looking cute that night, he thought. And, basically, according to him, he hadn't really had any of those kind of thoughts prior to the party about her. CJ's versions of events was that he had left the party at midnight and gone back to his apartment to sleep. When police looked at his phone records, though, they found he had called Arpana twice at 2:56 a.m. and 3:02 a.m., and these were the last calls that Arpana would ever receive. When CJ was questioned about the calls, he claimed to have no recollection of making them, which seems to be a theme in this case. No one has any recollection about any of these phone calls.
Yeah, how convenient.
Yeah. When he was shown a log of the phone records, he apparently said, "Oh crap," and refused to give any further information.
Not suspicious.
Yeah. CJ's original story was that he fell asleep at 3 a.m. and he woke up at 10 a.m. that morning. His phone logs, though, show that this was a lie and that he had tried to contact Arpana right around the time that she likely died. You know, we've mentioned too that the neighbors said they heard sounds of what they thought was consensual sex at around 3 a.m. So this is also around the time that CJ called Arpana.
Yeah.
A witness came forward and said that around 3 a.m. they had been returning back to their apartment from work. This person said they saw a, quote, non-black individual standing near Arpana's doorway at 3 a.m. The person the witness saw resembled CJ much more than Emmanuel. And when CJ was asked if he had gone to Arpana's apartment after making the phone calls, he said, "I don't think so." CJ's phone records and technology records also showed that at around 10 a.m. on the morning after the party, he had printed out maps for local pawn shops. And you also have to remember that Arpana's phone and camera and some of her valuables were taken from the scene and were never recovered.
Which is crazy. Like, I don't know. I just feel like some of that stuff should have been able to be, like, her motorcycle no one ever found.
Well, no, I even just was Googling while you were talking just to make sure that I didn't miss anything, and I can't find any mention of her motorcycle ever being found. Definitely her like BlackBerry and all that wasn't found, the camera, but I'm not 100% sure on the motorcycle, and I haven't been able to clarify that. But as far as I can tell, no, it wasn't found.
Yeah, it just seems kind of crazy.
And also too, like 2008, you have to remember this is kind of maybe pre-GPS, so that might have been why he was printing out the maps. Like I remember doing that for road trips. You'd have to go and print out all the directions step by step before you could go anywhere because you just didn't have GPS.
Mm-hmm.
CJ then, though, drove to the Canadian border where he attempted to cross into Canada. He was asked by authorities
not suspicious at all.
Yeah. He was asked by authorities what he was doing, and he said that he was kind of wanting to explore. He was turned away by border officials, though, as he didn't have a passport. So this is a very poorly thought out plan, clearly. CJ attended another party later in the day on November 1st. His friend said that when he arrived at the party, he was walking with a limp. During the party, there was some kind of, sounds like play wrestling, play fighting, and CJ would later tell investigators that he was injured during that play wrestling and that's how he got the limp. But his friends said that that doesn't seem like a legitimate story because he arrived with the limp, the timing doesn't match up. He already had the injury when he arrived at the party. CJ also apparently told some people that he had gone over to Arpana's apartment at some point in his sleep. He even asked people if they thought he had killed Arpana because he wasn't too sure of the answer himself. So kind of indicating that he may not have been aware of everything that went on that night, doesn't have a recollection for whatever reason. Sounds like he was very drunk and he wasn't entirely sure of what happened that night either. CJ's DNA was found on the bottle of motor oil and also on the bloody robe, as was Emmanuel's. Despite all of this, as we mentioned, CJ has never been charged in relation to this case, which blows my mind because there does seem like there is just as much evidence for him as there was for Emmanuel. Why did they, like, is it truly race related? There are a lot of articles about that aspect of the case. It could be. I'm not entirely sure. No one's ever clarified, but it blows my mind that CJ was never ever charged either.
I feel like CJ seems almost more suspicious than Emmanuel, like all things considered.
Yeah, I agree. So Emmanuel's second trial began in 2019. The jury were given no details about the first trial/mistrial. His attorneys tried to emphasize the reasonable doubt that existed in the case, and they highlighted CJ's possible involvement. CJ was called to the stand during the second trial, but he was limited as to what questions he could be asked due to his privilege against self-incrimination. And it was due to this limited testimony that this seemed to be the linchpin that started to create the reasonable doubt for the jury. The jury began deliberating on June 6, 2019. They were originally deadlocked, 4 innocent, 4 guilty, and 4 undecided. They went back to reconvene, and 5 days later, so they did deliberate for a very long time, they gave their verdict to the court. Emmanuel was found not guilty. One of the jurors later spoke to the media and gave their reasoning for the verdict. They said that the state's inability to reconcile the charges against Emmanuel with the evidence that also implicated CJ had played a major role in their decision. One juror spoke to the Seattle Times and said, "I think that this was the biggest reasonable doubt and no one could eliminate him as the killer. We found Emmanuel not guilty because of reasonable doubt, not because we thought he was completely innocent."
Yeah, it seems like they kind of just blew it.
Yeah, I feel like it was sounds like it was a totally botched investigation, and they like I just if they had have also included CJ in the charges or more of an investigation, I feel like maybe they would have been more successful in convicting
Yeah,
someone in this case.
the investigation seemed crappy. The prosecution's plan also seemed crappy. Was it
Yeah,
racism?
absolutely.
I don't know. To just be like, oh, well, he's black, so they'll probably think it was him instead of CJ, but they would have probably had better luck trying both of them together. I don't know, because CJ does seem pretty guilty.
Yeah. So after 9 years of awaiting his fate and waiting to find out what was going to happen, Emmanuel was released from custody. As I mentioned, there is a recent, even though this case is a little bit old, there was an article from June 2025, and it says judge found evidence that murder suspect's race motivated King County prosecutor. So again, like this is still ongoing. There was a 52-page order that was issued in May, and basically it says that the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office was motivated at least in part by Fair's race. So I'll link that on the blog if you want to read more about that. It does just kind of recap all the evidence that we've spoken about and how they messed up the case so badly. So as of October 2025, Arpana's murder remains unsolved, or no one has ever been, successfully convicted in the case. There are some other theories besides CJ and Emmanuel possibly being involved. One that is raised a lot is that there's a convicted rapist and home invader named Mark Patrick O'Leary. His name is brought up in relation to the case. He was known to have committed crimes in the area where Arpana lived. He was later linked to at least 5 violent rapes in the case. He was later linked to at least 5 violent rapes in different states. He would eventually be caught and he was sentenced to life in prison. During the investigation, a hard drive containing 75 gigs of information was found. The drive was encrypted, and apparently still to this day, investigators have still not been able to get into the drive, and they believe that their drive may hold more information about other victims of Mark's. People
That's crazy
also,
too. Like,
yeah.
how do you just not get into it in this day and age? Like,
I think, and I read it's called the wretch. They call it like it's such a wretched thing that they can't get into it, but that's what
oh,
they
really?
call it. But yeah,
Man,
I know.
that's crazy.
In this day and age, how can they not break into an encrypted drive? I don't know. The other name that is also mentioned quite a lot, and there's a lot of discussion online about it, is that serial killer Israel Keys may have been involved in this one. He was known to have committed at least 11 murders before his 2012 prison suicide. He was familiar with Washington and was apparently in the Seattle area on the weekend of Arpana's murder. Seattle was around 35 minutes from Redmond, where she was living. This is a quote I took, I think, from a Reddit post about this. It says, on October 31, 2008, Israel Keys flew from Anchorage to SeaTac. It was in the Seattle area until November 2nd, when he then flew from SeaTac to Boston. His reason for making this trip has never been uncovered. The same Reddit post draws some comparisons between Israel's usual MO and Arpana's death. It says her murder took place during the early hours of the morning, which was his preferred time to strike. She was brutally raped and strangled with a shoelace. He had a pattern of rape and strangulation. Her body and apartment supported evidence of attempted arson. As we mentioned, like they said, it looked like her body had apparently been tried to be lit on fire, which he frequently committed. Her body was doused in chemicals. He previously mentioned dousing chemicals on other victims after he murdered them. Then in this discussion, I read 2, which I thought was interesting because I probably don't think it was Israel Keys in this case. Someone wrote, they found 2 male DNA profiles on 2 different pieces of evidence. Israel is not responsible for all of the murdered and missing victims in America. I just feel like Israel Keys was a horrible, sadistic person. Absolutely agree with that. But then for him to go to Seattle, drive to and find Arpana's apartment, just somehow stumble across these people having a Halloween party. I just feel like it
waltz
seems
in with no one like noticing this weird guy,
and to leave left her body in the apartment. Like for no evidence to be found. I don't know. I just feel like it's like, I guess it's a possibility. I feel like it's highly unlikely. I feel like it seems like it was most likely someone in the apartment complex who had access to her apartment. They knew, people were calling her at the time. I just feel like the most likely scenario in this case is that one of the 2 people, either CJ or Emmanuel, were involved, or they were both involved. Yeah. So we have mentioned in the past that there's sometimes of the year where crimes do increase. There's a professor from Northeastern University, and they have said that violent crimes increase by as much as 50% on Halloween, which is 2 times the daily average. I don't think that's totally unexpected or unreasonable to believe, because obviously there's a lot of alcohol, there's people out and about. It's just one of those things where there's heightened emotions for a multitude of reasons. So I do think that is and probably also that just more people are out and about indicate, is.
And it's a holiday where people, like, you're supposed to be like mischievous,
yeah,
bad and scary and dark. So I just think that a lot of people go into it with like this idea already, or these, like, they just go into the night already wanting to be up to no good in some way.
And it just takes one person to take something the wrong way, or for something to go too far. Like, it's just a mix of that. Yeah, I don't think it's unexpected to think that stat is accurate, the 50% increase. There's many reasons why it could happen on Halloween.
Yeah, a lot of drinking, drugs, etc.
Yeah. So now we're 17 years on from Arpana's murder. It's still unsolved. Doesn't feel like anything much else will come of the case in terms of someone being convicted for her murder. It's more so the other things that went on in terms of Emmanuel being unfairly targeted and treated because of his race. That seems to be the main aspect of the case that is still ongoing.
Yeah, sadly, it seems like they probably have at least one of the right people, but they're stuck now at this point because of past mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they botched the case, and maybe that was their only chance. They can't, I
They
don't
can't come
believe
back
they
from
would
it.
try Emmanuel a third time. I guess they could go after CJ, but doesn't seem like that is in the works at the moment.
But yeah, so that's it for this episode. Everything will be on the blog at truecrimesocietyblog.com. So we're True Crime Society on Instagram. We're always posting current updates and all that there. If you want to see what we're up to, my Instagram is StephSum_, Olivia's TCS Olivia, and you can follow us there. Check us out on Patreon. We do weekly bonus episodes. We also do all the episodes ad-free, so you'd get 2 episodes a week without ads. And Patreon's like its own little fun community. We also do earlier release of the main episode, so you'd get it the day before. Otherwise, all the usual stuff you could share with your friends, family, whoever. Post on your Instagram stories. Love to see what you guys are up to while you're listening to the podcast. See what hobbies you guys have. It's fun to reshare them. Just keep doing that. Leave some nice Spotify comments. Make sure you're still following on whatever platform and all that. But that is it. So thank you guys for listening. Stay safe out there. Peace out.
See ya.